Joining me now is Greg Beischer, President and CEO at Alaska Energy Metals. Thanks for coming in today.
Oh, thanks for the invitation. Very pleased to be here in Toronto.
Now, you have a long history in Alaska. I don't need to tell you that. You say you've been living in Anchorage for about 30 years, and then going back about 30 years in the mid-90s, you're working for Inco, which you worked a total of 19 years, but a lot of that work was in Alaska. Here you are 30 years later. You're developing the Nikolai project in a similar region. So can you give us a bit of a backstory on your history there and what you're doing now with your company?
Sure. Well, I came up through the ranks of Inco. They moved me all around, actually, but then moved me to Alaska in 1995, actually to explore the exact same spot that we're now developing. And the reason was from a high level, there was a lot of similarity to our Nikolai project in Alaska to the Norilsk area of Russia, which is the biggest accumulation of nickel on Earth. And they sent me up there and said, Greg, go find another Norilsk. You know, I didn't, but we drilled hundreds of meters of disseminated sulfide, not the massive sulfide, the rich deposits we were looking for. What we did intersect wouldn't have been economic at the time, but everything's different for nickel. So I did 5 great years of work with Inco's team from Sudbury and elsewhere on the Nikolai project, but then it fell by the wayside as nickel plummeted in price in the late 90s, and I decided to stay in Alaska. I've been exploring the state ever since and living happily in Anchorage, Alaska.
I've seen that movie, Insomnia. We don't need to go into that, but that's one of my favorite movies. Now, so you're close to completing a 4,200 meter 8-hole program at the Eureka Zone. What can you tell us about the work you've done so far?
Sure. So a lot of it is historical work, some of which I did myself personally in the 90s. Others came along after me, did a lot of quality exploration drilled holes that indicates that there's a very long, thick, disseminated deposit of nickel sulfide. And so we started the company in March of this year. We raised funding, $12 million, that we've deployed now to drill these holes on a grid-style pattern to start to prove that the historical drilling is correct, and we can start to block out tonnage and the nickel in the ground. And we've done that. We've completed the program as of last week. First assays are expected imminently, and we look forward to those announcements.
Right. So you're going to combine those drill results with the historical data that you purchased, much of which you worked on. And then you'll eventually put together a maiden resource. So what are your expectations for the size and the potential of this resource?
So we think we'll publish by next March a resource that, if the historical grade is maintained, that there will be in excess of 1 billion pounds of nickel in the ground, with other metals, copper, cobalt, chrome, iron, platinum, palladium, and even a little bit of gold to go with it. The mineralization is not rich. It's a disseminated large volume of mineralization. But 1 billion pounds is significant. That's roughly 500,000 metric tons of contained metal, which is a substantial deposit. It'll catch the eye of major mining companies right off the bat, but it's going to likely grow a lot bigger.
Yeah, I mean, that'll catch people's attention when you've got a B in there for 1 billion. Just an aside, a sidebar question here. I'm just curious, in terms of the technology we're using back then versus now, is it night and day?
Technology and exploration?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of the same methods. As you mentioned, we purchased the data set for the project, which had fortunately been well preserved. It represents all the exploration since I started in 1995 right through to 2013, when the last work was done. There's $30 million worth of exploration work to create at the time. We paid a small percentage of that, literally pennies on the dollar. And we're utilizing that information, which was well done, since I created something myself, I would say.
Of course.
But even the workers that followed me did excellent work, and so yeah, we're using this information to great utility. But there are some advancements in geophysical surveying in particular, and of course nickel responds very well to geophysical. It's magnetic and it conducts very well. So electromagnetic conductors are a great way to find it. And we're going to use some of the more advanced stage geophysical data processing and interpretation that I think will lead us hopefully to some higher grade zones, as well as extending the known mineralization.
Now, Greg, what are the next steps through 23 and into 24?
Yeah, well, we'll have a series of assay results come out for all the drill holes we've done. It'll be December by the time we receive the last of the assay results. That gives us the opportunity then to do two things: calculate the maiden inferred resource, but also start the metallurgical surveys, studies that are going to be necessary to really help determine the economics. So from there we move on to early stage economic analysis. But we need that information first. Then we start to grow the deposit next year in 2024, more aggressive drilling program, and really build out that resource. In fact, I think we'll catch ourselves up to some of the peer companies in North America, like Canada Nickel or like FPX, who are getting really good traction in the market. And I think we're going to get that traction too.
Well, let's go there next in terms of your peers. You think you're undervalued. How is Alaska Energy Metals different?
Well, I guess every CEO thinks their company's undervalued,
Yeah.
but the market is what it is, and I think we've already been recognized. Our share price has risen from the March from 28 cents to 55 cents now, and I think there's lots of blue sky out in front of us. Our market cap today is 25 million. I look at our peers, and they're measured in the hundreds of millions, and we're going to catch up to them pretty quickly.
Right. I look at a lot of stock charts, as you can imagine, in this line of work with Red Cloud, and your stock did stand out because it's actually up compared to a lot of the stocks that are not. And as you said, so it's done well. So you got about $10 million in cash at last report in the till. What can you tell us about the shareholder base and the types of investors you're attracting?
Mm-hmm. Well, Red Cloud
Yeah.
came into the deal
Yeah.
in a brokered financing along with Canaccord and Echelon and Cormark, and it's a mostly high net worth retail group that's involved in the company. Only 51 million shares outstanding at this point. We'll raise money again before next summer. And it should be at a substantially higher share price. And I think at that point, institutional investors will start to come into the company.
All right, Greg, if you could summarize what you've been talking about here, what's the investment case in terms of being a leader as far as supplying nickel and other critical metals to the United States and to the EV revolution as well?
Well, that's it. I mean, the United States, I think, is actually quite vulnerable to supply disruption or just metal supply in general. It's abdicated most of the metal supply in the world to other countries. And now it's pushing hard to accelerate electric vehicle adoption, and it's working. People are adopting them. Penetration rates growing remarkably. There's 30 kilograms of nickel in every standard passenger car battery, and so the demand is surging, but there's not necessarily the supply there for the United States. Car companies are retooling their plants, spending billions. Battery manufacturers spending billions building battery plants, but nickel is going to be the choke point metal for those batteries, and they're realizing that, how vulnerable they are. So a domestic, secure supply of nickel, I think, is extremely important for the United States. Canada is the biggest supplier of nickel to the U.S., but Canada's building its own battery plants. I'm not sure all that nickel's going to make it to the U.S. anymore.
Right. No, it's a fascinating time, as you know. Great to learn more about you and Alaska Energy Metals. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you soon. Greg Beischer, President and CEO at Alaska Energy Metals.